program. We now move over to the Middle East now, where in the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas conflict, France's foreign minister has confirmed that 4 French activists have refused deportation after the interception of a Gaza-bound aid boat. The Israeli Navy stopped the Madleen, an aid ship operated by the Freedom Flotilla coalition, while it was in international waters. Listen in to the French foreign minister.
À ce jour, 2 d'entre eux ont accepté de signer les papiers les expulsant du territoire israélien et leur permettant de rentrer dans notre pays. 4 l'ont refusé à ce jour. Nous restons présents puisque cette présence consulaire fait partie des missions du ministère des Affaires étrangères et elle s'applique à toutes et tous, quelles que soient leurs opinions politiques, et que l'on les approuve ou qu'on...
The vessel, which was carrying humanitarian supplies and 12 international activists from France, Germany, Brazil, Turkey, Sweden, Spain and the Netherlands, was escorted to the Israeli port of Ashdod. According to French authorities, 5 French nationals who declined to leave Israel voluntarily have been detained and transferred to Ben Gurion Airport, where a judge will assess their cases. Meanwhile, Israel's Navy has carried out strikes on Houthi targets at the Red Sea of Port Hodeidah in Yemen. The Israeli military says the strikes targeted locations used for weapons transfers by the Iran-backed group. Houthi-run media reported 2 strikes on the port's docks. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that a naval and aerial blockade could follow if such attacks continue. There are no confirmed casualties so far, however. And lastly, in central Gaza, at least 17 people were killed and dozens were injured when Israeli forces opened fire near an aid distribution point. Local health authorities say large crowds of displaced civilians had gathered to receive aid. The injured were taken to hospitals in Nuseirat and Gaza City. The Israeli military has announced an investigation. Last week, authorities declared routes to US-supported aid centres as closed military zones during the night hours. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has not yet commented on the situation. We're now joined by Jordan Cope, who is a Middle East expert, and he is located in Erfurt, Germany. Thank you very much, Jordan, for joining us on the programme. Jordan, we've seen more reports of firing by Israeli forces on Palestinian civilians attempting to get aid. This information is obviously coming out of Gaza, but this is a repeated claim that people are making that this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is proving dangerous to civilians, and Israeli military are firing on people trying to get aid. What are your thoughts on this seemingly repeated situation that is occurring when the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is involved?
It's important to understand where this rumor is coming from. You mentioned health authorities. Those health authorities are from Hamas. Hamas is ultimately the one cultivating these myths in an effort to undermine Israel as it continues to gain more and more control over the Gaza Strip, which Hamas really realizes that it is losing quicker and quicker. What we are seeing right now in the Gaza Strip is the arising of some militia groups, such as the Abu Shabaab group, which are now seeking to oust Hamas from the Gaza Strip. Regarding your claim that 17 people were killed, the IDF has denied any possible involvement, even if this event occurred, as Hamas is claiming. It's possible, though, that the Abu Shabaab militia was actually responsible, perhaps, for some of those deaths. The IDF response so far has been that it shot some warning shots when its soldiers were being approached by some suspicious figures. But according to the IDF, there is no knowledge yet that it had any involvement whatsoever in these so-called 17 deaths. There have been several rumors now about the Humanitarian Foundation and its efforts to provide meals, hundreds of thousands of meals, one might add. Recently, Israel was also accused of just simply shutting down the distribution of food, and it was later found out that it wasn't Israel that ultimately caused the Humanitarian Foundation to temporarily suspend operations in Tel Sultan, Rather, it was a result of Hamas issuing direct threats and threatening the volunteers on the ground.
Jordan, there's been 127 people reportedly killed trying to get aid since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the GHF, started their operations in the space of 2 weeks. Are you saying that all of this information is false? And does the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation not have the responsibility of keeping those people safe that are trying to get aid, since that Israel is not letting established humanitarian foundations like the United Nations distribute aid like it previously did, which appeared to be not as incident prone, let's say?
That's blatantly untrue that the international community did not cause deaths when distributing aid. Distributing aid is actually a very dangerous operation because of stampedes that can occur, because of shooting and looting that can occur, which has definitely happened throughout this war. Hamas has seized so much of the aid throughout this war and has tried to monopolize it in order to continue to sustain itself throughout this war. Approximately 60% of all aid going into Rafah at one point was being seized by Hamas. And even recent aid has been seen to have been seized by Hamas, and aid convoys surrounded by Hamas members with guns. Even when Jordan and other countries were giving air deliveries to the Gaza Strip, some of the umbrellas on the aid did not expand, and it ultimately landed on civilians, killing them. So the fact that there is no humanitarian aid in Gaza, that was once a myth. There's been so many myths about humanitarian aid in Gaza right now, throughout the entirety of the war, because Hamas ultimately wants to perpetuate the myths that I'm currently hearing right now.
Jordan, these visuals of and interviews of people in the Gaza Strip, of people trying to get aid, going to these checkpoints and being greeted with stampedes, Israeli warning shots, as you've said. These are first-hand accounts that have been reported on, and visuals state for themselves. It seems like chaos. No, this does not seem like a well-ordered operation at all. That's what critics would say.
Unfortunately, this is no university cafeteria. This is a war zone, and the IDF has done a tremendous effort to make sure that humanitarian aid gets into the Gaza Strip. Whether it gets into the right hands is a more complicated matter, but as the former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, recently noted, 1.7 million tons of aid have entered the Gaza Strip since the beginning of the war. And as a matter of fact, according to him,
Apologies, Jordan. Apologies, Jordan. We do have to move on. We're running out of time on this topic. I just want to ask about these sanctions that are getting imposed on two far-right Israeli ministers. You have Ben-Gvir and Smotrich over their role in the Gaza conflict. They will be having sanctions imposed on them by Britain, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, among others. These are staunch Israeli allies traditionally. What are your views on the heightening allied criticism for Israel, particularly for the war in Gaza and the West and the settlements in the West Bank?
First, regarding your phrase, the ministers, quote unquote, you have, they're not my ministers. I'm not an Israeli citizen. I will say that Britain is particularly weak, though, when it comes to morality right now. Britain has ultimately decided at a time when it became clear that Iran has been testing relevant tests to conduct nuclear weapons, decides to sanction Israel. The comments of these ministers, however unsavory they might be, do not actually lead to any action item responses. It's very concerning why Britain still has relations with Iran at this time and isn't sanctioning Iran enough. Regarding presence of Israelis in the West Bank, I will like to add that it would be a travesty to describe and to condemn people indigenous to the land living in their historic homeland as somebody that is not indigenous, to try to portray them as somebody foreign, as a colonizer. To do so to Indians in Kashmir would be equally insulting, and I advise the channel to consider how it discusses Jews living in an area where they should be allowed to live.
Okay, Jordan, the settlements are internationally known as illegal settlements. The Palestinian territories were assigned after the war in 1967. What are your thoughts on them being viewed as illegal by the international community?
Just going on the second story. And
First and foremost, there is tremendous bias within the United Nations to begin with. Over 50% of all General Assembly resolutions have been against Israel, as have approximately over 50% of all Human Rights Council resolutions against Israel. The United Nations is a function of politics, of alternative interest, and what the Geneva Conventions actually say about settlements are they are only illegal if a country that is occupying another country's land forcefully transfers their citizens into that territory. There has never been a Palestinian state that has been created. There have been agreements that have helped try to create the opportunity for a future of a Palestinian state, but the argument falls flat on its head despite alternative politics and political agendas. Jewish presence in the West Bank, even though it is banned by the Palestinian Authority by threat of death penalty, is not illegal under international law if you actually consider the proper tenets of international law themselves.
Okay, Greta Thunberg has accused Israel of kidnapping and the other activists in international waters after the aid boat was intercepted. What are your thoughts on that accusation of kidnapping after the boat was intercepted in international waters?
I'm sorry, Pratik.
I think Greta Thunberg is a hypocrite of the highest order. She's an environmental activist who's now flying back on a jet all the way home, and on top of that, having been on a yacht in an entirely unenvironmentally friendly operation. She had made her intent clear to break the law. She was properly arrested and detained, and to her luck, she has actually been sent back to the European Union despite and not being tried and detained on Israeli territory. She got away lucky with it this time. She should stick to environmental activism and keep her hands out of the Middle East. But if she is going to get more involved in environmental activism, maybe she needs to wash her hands after being part of a flotilla that was caught throwing its phones in the water as they were being detained.
Jordan Cope, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We now move over to Europe, where a deadly